Let me set this down. I tell you what. Whew! Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I am the immortal Kevin Donovan, and I'm going to tell you about my lacrosse story. Canton, you see the jacket? Ooh. Yeah. Yep. Canton North Stars. Starting crease attackman. Ugh. This helmet has not been on my head since 1998, and it's 2021. I dug out the jacket. I found the gloves. These are real legit gloves that we had back in the late 90s. Notice the leather palms. Now they're all mesh. You weren't allowed to cut these out. I even lost some strings in them. Give me a second though. I can't do this whole video. This is gonna hurt. Oh. Yikes! Whew! Look at that. I'll set this guy up here. Can you see that? I don't know how to do this. Look at the back. Here we go. Actually, this will come in important. 20, Daryl Page. We lost that guy on our team one year. He got in a car accident and passed away, which was really unfortunate. He was a buddy of mine. And I am number 30. So we remember Daryl, DP, and I'm number 30. This is the first generation Cascade helmet. This is the first year they came out with this style. It was in the late 90s. And nobody else had them. It's, again, being the blue and gold, that's what we rocked right there. They don't even use these gloves anymore. These are not even... These are so old and out of date that these are relics that they don't use anymore. We'll just set those aside for now. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever time it is, folks. Good to see you. Welcome back to the channel. If you're a subscriber, if you're new, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. It is warm. They made these jackets to be warm. Woo! Woo! Hi! I'm back. I'm here. Oh, man. So I wanted to give part 2 of my college story, my lacrosse story. I started with football when I got in early, did the whole football thing. Go back, check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. For sure, I quit football and then went to play lacrosse. Lacrosse I found far more success in college with. It was a lot more fun. With my body type and my speed, I just wasn't the fastest guy out there. I'm an endomorph, short, stocky. I can put on weight pretty easily, not just fat, but I can actually work out and gain muscle pretty quickly. But I just never really had that high cardio, and I never really had that quick speed. But I had a real true love for the game of lacrosse, and I really worked on it all the time. I loved working stick skill. I loved working. I got my stick. This is an old stick. This is not the stick I used in college. This was a different one. Let me see if I can do one trick. Oh! Let's do that again. One more time. Ah, almost. You're supposed to throw it around your arm and catch it. I'll give it one more go. Oh, hey! There it is. Third time's a charm, huh? I did it by the way, I did that trick like 4 times before I started the camera just to make sure I could still do it. Nailed it every time. Camera's running. Go figure. 6 diamond traditional strong. Offset head. This is the first generation offset. This is the STX Excalibur. This is a graphite shaft. This is first generation stuff with the bootlace throwing strings. Yeah, this is first generation stuff that came about in the mid 90s. And this technology, they don't use this no more. Actually, I don't have to get up it. Crossball. These are hard as shit. It is a solid rubber ball. Like you can't squish it. It's not a squishy ball. It doesn't have any give to it. A good lacrosse player at the college level, those guys are shooting anywhere upwards of 70 miles an hour up to 100 miles an hour, anywhere in there. And the top level college lacrosse guys, they're throwing, 90 mile an hour, 80, 90 mile an hour balls all the time. There are professional leagues in lacrosse. Fastest shot that I know of that was recorded was actually 115 miles an hour. A guy fired one. So when you get this thing cooking at 100 miles an hour, I've seen this break bones. I've seen this send kids to the hospital. I've seen this dent these face masks. This is steel. Like this is a hard thing. I've seen these bend these bars. It's wild. I've seen guys really, really let go of these. And you get a lot of leverage, obviously. You got a 3-foot stick with a net in it, and if you catch it just right, and you can generate a lot of power with it. These things can do a lot of damage. I got hit with this so much my sophomore year in high school. I had more saves than our backup goalie. That's a fact. I love the game. It's very dangerous, high speed, high impact. It's a collision sport, contact everywhere. It's a mix of basketball strategy, soccer because you're running all the time, hockey because you're using a stick, football because you're in full gear and colliding, again, like hockey. It's a flowing kind of game. There are positions, there's offense and defense. There's obviously a goal and a goalie sitting in the goal. But we run plays more like basketball around the net. Only instead, because in lacrosse, the goal is not at the end line. The goal is actually in the field, so you can go behind the cage and run around back there too, which is easy to set up different offenses and different strategies. So it's an interesting game. Lacrosse came from the Native American culture. I believe it was called baguette first, and it was a way for cultures to settle disputes over land or territory or just to have fun. And they literally had no rules. They didn't have rules. The field could be 2 miles long. It could be 100 versus 10. Like, they didn't have rules. The equipment didn't really exist. They built sticks. They were literally like a stick with like maybe a circle at the top or like a long horseshoe or something like that they put some leather around it so it could cradle something. They didn't have a ball. They'd usually just use a rock, something hard that they could just fire around, maybe a petrified piece of wood or something that they shaved into a sphere or close enough. But yeah, that's what a wild game that came from. And then when the French occupied territories, French started playing the game and then renamed it lacrosse. This is actually your cross. When you're on the field, it's referred to as your cross. So you run around with your stick, which is the cross in the rule book. And there are different rules for how deep the pocket can be. That's really shallow, by the way. I don't know if I can get a good shot of that. That's not very deep. That's pretty shallow. However, these strings are 20 plus years old, and they're a little dry. This is leather. I would still go out and play catch with this and not worry about breaking it. But they've definitely dried out quite a bit. Maybe it needs some oil or something. But this used to be a much deeper, easier to control pocket. Things happen. So my story with lacrosse is my freshman year, I tried out for the baseball team in spring. During tryouts, I made it for the first few days. And I realized the guys were better baseball players than me. The last level of baseball that I had played was Little League. And then I'd skipped a few years, and I decided I'd just try out for JV. Those guys were way better at baseball than I was, and I was not keeping up with my skill level. So I actually got cut from baseball my freshman year, which really made me sad. I'd never been cut from anything before, and I was just super sad. And here's the weird thing. My sister, this isn't the weird part. It's a coincidence. My sister, Colleen, was trying out for the girls softball team as well. She's a grade above me, so I'm freshman. She's sophomore. She's trying out for softball. Of course, our mom was going to come pick us up after school, after practices, after tryouts to get us home. So I had to sit through the girls' practice and wait because it was boys' practice first and then the girls and then whoever else. So I did my practice. They hung a thing up one day. I went to practice, looked at the sheet, and my name wasn't on it. I'd got cut. So I literally had to sit there and just wait through practices until Mom was going to come pick us up. So there I am sitting in the gym waiting. The girls do their practice in the gym because it's still, cold outside, Not quite April yet. It's March. Still, in March in upstate New York, super cold. I'm sitting in the gym. The girls finish up practice. They go in the locker room and they're gearing down. And I'm literally sitting in the gym by myself as a freshman, just kind of hanging out, doing nothing. This is before the days of cell phones too. And all of a sudden I hear this ruckus. This just, I don't know what it was, just a banging and clanging and booming. And I'm like, what? It sounded like a garbage truck with its wheels on fire was coming rolling out of the locker room. all of a sudden, all these dudes come busting out wearing helmets and gloves with these sticks, and they bust out into the gym, and they start whipping that ball around, and they got like 20 balls flying around, and there's the JV and the varsity team came out at the same time, so they were just flooded into the gym. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And they're chucking this ball, and they're checking sticks, and they're hitting each other, and I was like, what? Who didn't tell me about this, and why? I was enthralled with what I had seen, and I only sat there for 10 minutes, and then my sister came out of the locker room, and she's like, we gotta go, Mom's probably outside. And I'm like, hang on, I gotta watch this. She's like, no, we're leaving. So we had a little bit of a fight about that. I wanted to stay and watch the whole practice. I couldn't believe what I was watching. But I was far too chicken shit to try out for the team. So at that point, I just hounded my poor mother to go and buy me a lacrosse stick. Finally, she caved, and we went and bought a lacrosse stick. I didn't know what kind to get. I didn't know what to look for. I found a real basic one. I think it was the Brine High Wall 2, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that they make those anymore. Again, this is mid-90s. This is my freshman year, 1992, so I don't think that they make those sticks anymore. But I found it. It was in the price range that Mom was willing to waste on me because she didn't know that I was going to follow through the sport. And I said, I saw the guys practice. This is how I got her. I was like, I saw the guys practice. I want to play next year. I got to practice. I need to get a stick. She's like, fine. And I found the Brine 2, and it was $30, $35, something like that, maybe $40. I'm not real sure. It wasn't terribly expensive. I mean, it was, when you don't have a lot of money. It was a cheap enough stick, and I got it. I didn't put that stick down for about a year. Like, it was just in my hand. And every time I could have a chance to go around someone that knew about the game of lacrosse, had their own stick and a ball or whatever, I would be right there. Ball handling, trying to pass and catch. And one of the things that we had is up in our property, we had a small barn that happened to be red, but it was for like chickens and pigs. It wasn't a very big barn. It was like a huge doghouse, essentially. Big enough for people to walk in, but it wasn't very big. Well, we had it was in between 2 yards that we had. We'd let the overgrowth, the hedgerow just kind of take over it. One storm, we had part of the roof blew off and landed directly behind it. I was in the yard behind it, and I realized that I couldn't throw the ball very well, but if I had my stick, of course, I had my stick in my hand. If I threw the ball against the back of the barn, a piece of the roof had come down and was plywood all over there, and it knocked down all the tall weeds. So I could bounce it off the back of the barn, it would hit the plywood, and it'd bounce into my stick. And that's what I did. I went, boop, 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 boop. And I just did that over and 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 over again. Probably, I'm not even kidding, hundreds of thousands of times. I got to the point where I was getting so good at throwing at the barn, and then it was shooting at the barn, and I could pick off specific slats of wood at the barn at will. The barn was pretty old and raggedy. It was not new. It was literally decades old. I don't know if it was 50 years old, so maybe something like that, 70 years old. I'm not sure. But I could pick off a piece of wood on purpose and break it. I just kept throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. I had to repatch the back of that barn, I don't know, a bunch of times, and my dad got pissed at me because I was using all the old wood. You know how dads have that stash of wood, that good wood in the garage that they're always going to use for a project or they want to keep, like, that's a good piece of plywood, don't throw that out. I grabbed most of that kind of those boards and that wood, and I went up to the red barn and I stole a bunch of nails and hammered that wood back up on the back of the barn because I was breaking so many slats I didn't have a wall anymore. So I went and replaced that, and I just kept throwing at the back of that barn. That was the most valuable training that I ever did for the game of lacrosse. It really taught me my stick skills, catching, throwing, shooting, passing, all of that. Got my accuracy down because if I missed, I'd lose the ball. And now, while these things aren't terribly expensive, if you live way out in the sticks where I lived, and you lost one and you only had one, you're done playing until you can beg, borrow, and steal to get yourself another one. So they weren't super easy for me to come by, and they were super easy to lose. So I was ultra careful about my targets. I wasn't just haphazardly winging the ball around. I had to, because I couldn't lose them. I did find eventually that we had dogs, and we had a dog named Sparky. And I could take Sparky up on the leash, and dogs, obviously, with their sense of smell, he could pick these things out of the weeds like you wouldn't believe. So every once in a while, I'd grab him and go to the back area where I kept losing them because they'd get past me once in a while, and they'd go into the weeds behind me, and I'd never see him again. He'd grab the dog and walk him up there, and sure enough, he'd sniff him out and he'd grab him, and I'd found, 6, 7, and 8 of them, every time I brought the dog up there. So I did get him back, but eventually I lost him anyway. And these things, like I said, are rubber. This one's pretty old, but they do start cracking and wearing out, and weather gets to them. So like after they spend a season or two outside, they're really not that, they don't bounce real well. They're not real good balls. But I spent all that time throwing at the wall. And then my high school, Seton Catholic Central, got a lacrosse team. Mark Ward was the coach. It was my sophomore year. I decided I was going to jump on the team and play. I talked to a buddy of mine, and I was talked into playing long stick, which is a stick that's literally twice as long as it's a 6-foot stick with a head, same type of head. They have defensive ones, offensive ones, midfielders. There's all different styles of the head and the string kits you can get for them, mesh or traditional, and how many diamonds you want to use, all that. But I figured I wanted to play defense. I wanted to play long stick. It was a cool position. So I jumped in my sophomore year, tried out for the lacrosse team. Fuck baseball. I'm out of that. I jumped right into lacrosse. I just worked hard. I just worked really super hard. I was really into the game. I was a student of the game. I really wanted to play. I wanted to prove myself out there as much as I possibly could, and I found a home for it. Now, Mr. Ward put me out there as man-down defenseman, and what that means is when our team got a penalty, we would short ourselves a guy, but we would also trade off a midfielder and put on an extra long stick. So there would be 4 defensive long sticks because the other team had an extra player. They were man up and we were man down. So we'd pull our middies off. I'd go out there as a long stick, and then we'd shuffle around who was going to cover who. But we wanted more defensive players out there. And when you have the 6-foot stick, it's a lot easier to defend these guys with the 3-footers because you can throw checks way out there, deflect balls. It's easier to pick up ground balls. You can throw the ball a lot further because you have far more leverage. But you have a little bit less control. If you look at the guys that play now, the style of game is wildly different than it was in the late 90s. The shit we were doing in the 90s was basic compared to what these guys are doing now. But some of the things we were doing were groundbreaking. And I found that interesting, that there was a move that I always did in college, and our coach was Coach Youngs, would yell at me all the time because in the attack, you would take with momentum, I'm not going to do it with the ball, I don't want to drop, but you would take the stick, and with momentum, you could literally go up and over somebody like that, right? It was a swim move that you could do. And I learned that in summer league, playing summer leagues in Binghamton. I got to college, and after football, jumped on the lacrosse team, and I started going to those practices and started hanging out with that club and doing that. Every time I did it, Coach Youngs would scream at me. He's like, don't you ever do that. I don't want to see that anymore. That's garbage, blah, blah, blah. Well, come to find out, here we are now 20-something years later. That's a common thing. Everybody does that. That's what they do. That's how you get over a defenseman. You swim over the top. So I was doing that back in the late 90s. So don't give me that shit, because we were doing groundbreaking stuff back then. Not all of it was great, but one thing was pretty good, and that was it. But I had played nonstop lacrosse since I made my mother buy me that stick. I had played nonstop lacrosse. I played fall ball, the club scene. I had played pickup games. I had played, there is a kind of a lacrosse community in the high school area, in the Binghamton area. Everywhere in the Northeast, lacrosse is a bigger sport than anywhere else in the country. It exists, but it's a lot less. And it's picking up speed, and it's picking up momentum, but in the Northeast is where the home is really of lacrosse, is where the epicenter is. In the summertime in Binghamton, if you go to some of our local parks, Otsenango Park, Binghamton had a artificial field. We called it the deck. Go to the deck on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. Just a bunch of lacrosse guys would show up. We would kind of weirdly, randomly pick teams inside, and then you would just play for a couple hours till it started to get dark, and then we just kind of called it. I was always around for that kind of stuff and playing, whether it was at Otsenango or whether it was on the deck or whether it was at a club. And then, of course, for the season for school. Now, here's the cool thing. Well, it's kind of cool. It was an interesting thing that happened. I played my sophomore year at Seton, and we had our own little tiny field to play, the Field of Dreams we called it. It had just got converted to a 100-yard field, and Mr. Ward went out there and did a lot of work personally himself and lined the field and got cages and nets and put everything together so the guys could play, and he was our coach. Well, the next year, the problem with that year was we only had about 25 guys that came out to be on the team total for both varsity and JV. So the problem was we had a lot of young guys, smaller guys, but we didn't have enough to fill a varsity and a JV. So he made just one large varsity team. That was unfair to some of the younger guys. It was cool that they got to say they were on varsity, but they didn't really get on the field much. And for good reason. Some of them just physically, there's a reason there's different levels. So you don't want to be putting a freshman out there that doesn't know what he's doing. First-year freshman out there against seniors that have been playing for a long time. Kid get crushed. My first year, I was a sophomore, but I was a heftier kid. I was playing football. Like, I could protect myself. I was a long stick. I was doing most of the hitting. So it worked out differently for me. Because of the bad turnout for us, there was also Binghamton High School had a bad turnout the next year. And all the parents got together and the athletic directors, and they voted that Binghamton and Seton will merge lacrosse team. We became the Binghamton-Seton Salukis. And a Saluki is an Egyptian racing dog. It's one of the fastest dogs in the world. They're like a long-haired greyhound, essentially. They're really cool looking. Look up what a Saluki is. If I find one, I'll put an image in. Yeah, we were the Salukis because the Binghamton were the Salukis back in the day, back in the 70s or 80s. They were already before they were the Patriots, they were the Salukis. So we took that name back and we became the Binghamton-Seton Salukis. Junior and senior year, I played with the Binghamton guys in the Binghamton facilities with the Binghamton personnel, Binghamton coach, Dave Garbarino. Mr. Ward was assistant, kind of helping, but we played, that's why I got to know the Binghamton scene of lacrosse much better. I got to play with a D1 high school, which was Binghamton, coming from a little Catholic school, but what an experience that was. And then going into college, I had, like I said, I had been nonstop playing sophomore, junior, and senior year, nonstop playing. I got a lot of backup time. My sophomore year, I got a lot of play time. Junior year, I kind of rode the bench a bit. Senior year, I got a lot more play time. I was like half starting, man down. I was a role player, as a lot of seniors get to be. I was just doing my job. And then when I went to college, I changed from long stick to an attackman because I didn't want to play long stick anymore. I wanted to score goals, and I was good at that. I found I was good at that when I was playing the off-season leagues, when I was doing the club teams, when I was doing the pickup games and that kind of stuff. When I had the short stick, I was doing much better. It was pretty cool scoring goals and doing that, and I knew that the defensive players in the college level were much bigger and badder than me, and me beating them out for a starting position was going to be slim. Also, at Canton, where am I? Where's my name? Boom. At Canton, there were not as many attackmen. There was a ton of midfielders. There was a bunch of defensemen, and there was like 2 or 3 attackmen. And I was like, yeah, I was going to play attack anyway. I'm like, sweet. There's less guys for me to try and beat out. And sure enough, during the club season anyway, I got to step right in. And Youngsley put me on the crease, and I learned I was good crease attackman because I had that study of the game being on the defensive side of the ball for 3 years in a row, nonstop, playing defense, but understanding and learning the game, understanding and learning stick work, passing, throwing, all that. It worked out so beneficial for me that it was easy for me just to trade sticks and stay pretty much in the same position, except instead of keeping people away from the cage, I was the one going towards the cage. And I ended up being very successful doing that. And Youngsley put me on the crease. I started scoring goals, and I was shorter and stocky. If I was taller, it would have been helpful. But being short and stocky, guys would try and hit me and knock me out of the crease. I could just hold my own. I was playing football with the big boys not that long ago, so knocking heads wasn't a big deal for me. So I really enjoyed playing lacrosse, and I found a lot more success with it. Problem for me came when I started doing drugs and drinking. And I cannot express to you how much I wish I never started doing any of that stuff. You know what the easiest way to quit is? Don't start. I wish I never started smoking cigarettes. I don't wish I never smoked weed. I smoked weed when I was a teenager, probably from 18 to in my early 20s, and then that just kind of faded away, and I hadn't smoked weed in decades. I didn't give a shit because it kind of went away. Drinking is one thing that kind of held on. But what happened was smoking before practices. I was smoking weed and getting high before practices because I thought being high at practice was going to be fun. Turned out that was much more of a hassle than it was fun. But we were just down the road from St. Lawrence University. And St. Lawrence is a big school, and they got a bigger athletic facility. They had a field house, and they allowed us to go in and practice during the club times, fall ball, winter ball. They let us go and use the clubhouse like late at night, like after everybody was done. We could go practice at like 9 p.m. So we would run practices from like 9 to 11 p.m., like that kind of stuff. But we were at the field house at St. Lawrence. We were doing drills, and coach said one-on-ones to the cage. And that means that the attackman takes off from a certain point. The defenseman's on it. You try and beat that defenseman and shoot and score. That's all it is. Pretty simple, right? Well, he started us from the back corner. So the cage was about 10 yards up and about 20 yards to my left. So it was Kitty like on an angle out and away from me. And I had a defensive guy with a 6-foot sticks, about about 6 foot away from me. Blows the whistle and you just take off. You try and put a move on him and run, and you start running towards the cage and he starts throwing these bombs of a check. Now you got these gloves on, these are protecting your hands. These are pretty solid. You're not really going to get hurt. You catch one in your fingers, that sucks. But usually you're catching them in the back of the hand or the wrist, and these are pretty good about that. You're also, back in the day, I had arm guards that went from the glove comes up to here, that's my elbow. So I only have that much space between the end of the glove and my elbow. And the arm pads came down. There was only like a little tiny sliver of skin. And I had this big old arm pad with a big old plastic cap over the end, and then it came up a little bit. And then I had shoulder pads on that would come down and overlap the top side of the thing. So your whole arm is armored, right? From your fingertips to your shoulders, around your chest, that's all armored. And a lot of the guys even wear rib protectors. I mean, you see those in NFL quarterbacks. They look like they're fat, but they're not, because they got this big thing around their waist. We called them ribbies. So guys would wear ribbies as well. So when you picked your arms up and they threw a check underneath, they'd instead of catching it in the ribs, you'd catch it in that gear. So we had full armor on. Like, I wasn't, you're not going to get real hurt doing this. What I did though is, because I was kind of not right in my head, like I said before, maybe I was maybe it was 420 before we went to practice. I took off going to the cage, and I felt that I could beat the defenseman that I had. I was a little bit faster, I was a little bit quicker, and I had much better stick skills. And I went and put a dodge on him, and he kind of bit. So I was about a half step in front of him as we were coming around to the cage. But I had a bad angle to shoot, so I wanted to re-juke him to shake him a little bit more. And what I thought I was going to do is literally put the brakes on and cut back behind him. He was going to overshoot me, and I was going to cut behind him and then boop, pop one in. What had happened was I came around the corner and I planted my right foot as hard as I could and went to turn. I went one way, my knee went the other way, and I went right to the ground, boy. Blown out ACL. I didn't know that at the time. We thought it was a sprain. We thought, because it definitely dislocated when that happened. Thought it just dislocated and was a sprain, and turns out it was a torn ACL, which back then was a much more major surgery than it is nowadays. Nowadays they have better procedures, and they can fix that right away, and within a month or two you're up and walking again, and they can pretty much take care of that way easier than they used to. So the surgery I had to get, I'll fast forward briefly, I had to go and get a reconstructive surgery for my ACL. So what they had to do is cut top of my kneecap all the way down, open my skin, remove my kneecap, pull my knee apart, gouge out where my ACL was, take another ACL that they had farmed from somewhere off my body. They took one that was that knee, but the front ligament that attaches your shin bone to your kneecap right at the top. When where the doctors hit your knee, where your reflexes are, that hard ass tendon that you got, they shaved part of that off and then drilled new holes and put 4 screws, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom, and they put a new ACL in my knee, put my kneecap back on, stitched me up. That's how they did it back in the day. Very intrusive surgery. It takes a year to fully recover from those kind of surgeries. Nowadays, they just do it with an orthoscopy, something like that, where they literally just, they either use a cadaver ACL, they can use part of your hamstring, they could shave it off one knee or the other knee, and then when they get it, which isn't that, they could do it with the ortho. So they literally stick a camera in one side, 2 tools in the other, and then they can do that whole process without opening up your knee. They make 3 little puncture wounds. Far less invasive, far less damaging. They can get all that stuff in and out and fix your knee with an ortho surgery. My buddy had one, and he was, within a couple weeks, he was up and walking like normal, like nothing happened. And I'm like, motherfucker. I was down for months. I had an immobilizer on. I was on crutches forever. And then I ran into complications after that, which kept me in and out of surgeries on my knee. I had shattered my kneecap. They bolted that back together. I had to go back and get all those pins and wires removed after that. I hurt the meniscus, which is not the top layer of water that domes over a glass. Named for the same shape is the piece of cartilage that sits between your femur and your shin bones. That's called your meniscus. And if you rupture that or hurt that in any way, They have to use an orthoscope, go in there, shave that smooth, flatten it back out. Otherwise, there's a ton of discomfort, pain. A lot of times what happens when you get older, you'll start to get bone-on-bone grinding because that meniscus will wear away. And they have yet to figure out what to put in there to have that be, corrected again. So I ran into a bunch of knee problems, and all stemmed from me getting high before practice, juking the wrong way, trying to go too fast, trying to be too cool, blowing my knee out. And then I spent the rest of my time in college drinking and partying. And then I came home and paid for that. Literally, when I came home, my father handed me the bill. And he's like, well, hope you had fun. Here you go. You pay for it. I'm like, okay, fair enough. But I truly had a great time. I met a lot of good friends, a lot of dear friends that played lacrosse. Still got a buddy of mine, Curdy Birdie. Got you on Facebook. I'll tag you in this. Man, what a lot of times we had traveling, learning new stuff, and playing hard. Lacrosse was a big part of my life for a long time. And I truly have a passion for the game. I love it. And in 2003, I think it was, I coached the 10 to 12-year-olds at the Owego Boys Club. And, man, I love doing that. That was a lot of fun. It was super stressful on me. I was still in my 20s, still a heavy drinker. Didn't really have my shit together. So it was hard for me to corral and run 20 kids playing lacrosse. But I love that experience. And maybe someday, maybe soon, being that I have my shit a little bit better together, maybe a little more organized, maybe I'll be able to coach again and teach them the skills that it took for me to get from never playing to playing, practicing so hard. I was showing the coach that I could play, getting on the field, and then getting involved with a Division I high school, not by choice, just kind of by circumstance, but getting involved with a Division I high school, which played other Division I schools. So the level of competition went from Class C, Section 3, tiny Catholic school to D1, the level of competition was immense. And then using that ability and the stuff that I learned there to jump into college and play was wildly helpful. And, I got a head full of lacrosse knowledge that just sits there useless because I don't share it with anyone. And I think that's probably a shame. Maybe I should definitely go and try and coach those kids again because I had a lot of fun doing that. When you have your shit together and you're not drinking all the time and not worried about this stuff, it's probably going to be a lot easier. So that's probably something I might have to get back into. But man, what a love of my life lacrosse was. I used to string these. I used to make up my own stringing patterns. This is what they call traditional strung, an 8-diamond. And you literally count the knots on it as it goes up. That's how you count what the diamonds is. They got the bootlaces, 3 bootlaces for throwing strings. There's so many combinations you can get and so much you can do. And nowadays kids use mesh. So those are leather strings. So they get wet. They start fucking up and getting stretched out and moving. Now they use all weather hard mesh. So it doesn't matter what conditions you're out in. The mesh, the pocket's going to stay right where it's going to stay. So the technology has increased. The helmets have gotten better. The equipment's gotten lighter and more flexible. They're not these monsters of gloves with solid leather palms. And a lot of guys back in the day used to literally cut these out. So they'd put like a piece of tape across it and cut this out so they could actually feel the stick again. And they'd cut the fingers out a little bit. That was illegal. The refs caught on that guys were doing that. And they could have better manipulation with their fingers through the glove. And they ixnayed that. So the manufacturers started putting mesh in the palms instead of that leather. And it's way easier to grab and manipulate. They put better knuckles in instead of this kind of stuff. They actually put bendable knuckles in so you can, bend your fingers the correct way. But man, what a lot of fun. I love lacrosse. It was great. I wish I didn't get into drugs and smoking and doing stupid shit. I would have stayed with lacrosse. I actually had a talent for it. And Coach Youngsy said, hey man, if you just opened a book, you would go somewhere. And he was right. And I was just too full of myself, too much ego, too much stupidity. I had talent, but I wasted it because I wanted to, I didn't want to give my full potential. I wanted to screw around and have fun because I never felt that I was allowed to have fun when I was growing up. And when I was on my own, I was like, oh, party time. Nobody's making me work hard. I don't have to work hard. My talent's going to take me as far as it's going to go, and then I'm going to do what I want. And if you don't put any effort into things, then you're not going to reap any rewards. And I totally did not put in nearly enough effort to reap any rewards from lacrosse. And then, of course, blowing my knee out because I decided I wanted to get stoned before practice. Stupid idea. Been suffering with that ever since. For the rest of my life, I'll have a bum knee that I'm worried when I walk on snow and ice. I'm worried when I go up and down steps. I'm in my early 40s now. I still feel good. I go golf. I can still walk. I can I go bowling all the time. Like I can do stuff, and I'm not crippled by any means. But I know for sure in 20 years that knee's going to give me problems. I'm probably going to have a knee replacement. Could have avoided all of that if I just kept my head on straight, said no to drugs, flew the right path. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a kid. But again, with the experiences that I had through the game, the friends that I've met, the memories that I've made, are invaluable to me, and I would never give it up. I might change a couple of things if I got to do it again, but I definitely do it pretty much the same way. Probably wouldn't smoke weed before that practice. I definitely changed that part because I don't want to blow my knee out again, nor would I try and make that move either. But I would pretty much do it all the same. What a group of guys that was. How much fun that was. I couldn't even tell you. Yeah, I truly loved it, and I truly loved the game of lacrosse. And I still watch and observe today. Unfortunately with COVID, they shut down the seasons for a lot of the schools and other things. But, hopefully this year it's coming back. And, man, I'd love to watch the new talent come up. These kids are getting better and better every year. And I thought I had stick skills. These kids will blow me out of the water. I think it's fantastic. I love it. And I'd love to coach the young ones again, express my knowledge of the game and share that with them. I would never break this gear out again. This is going right back in the closet, and never again is this coming out. But I'm never gonna throw it away. I'll tell you that. I'm gonna keep it forever. That was my lacrosse story. Kevin, number 30. So when you see me rocking number 30, this is why I rock number 30. The immortal Kevin Donovan played lacrosse for many years, and I was good at it. And I wasted my own potential because I decided on purpose to make bad choices. So hopefully somebody gets something out of that. Hopefully you're entertained during this video. Please like, share, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, KevDon8988, I believe I am. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Kevin Donovan. So come check me out, follow me, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that jazz. And I will be back again soon with another installment of Storytime. And I don't know, we'll probably keep going with the college theme for a minute. I hope to see you then. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. I really do. You make this channel what it is. I'm out. Peace.